Nancy Reagan, Mrs. Reagan. I,
Yeah.
I am, I am a well for information, not a fountain for it.
Yeah, I had a great relationship with Mrs. Reagan, and I'm so appreciative of her because, of course, here comes this young woman who is serving her husband in the office, and she could have had a very adversarial relationship with me, but instead chose to have just a beautiful, loving, helpful, kind, informative relationship with her. She was somebody that I felt like I could ask protocol questions to, and I think she appreciated the fact that I did ask. I learned very early on with her that there were a couple of things that mattered to her. Loyalty was tremendously important to her. She knew that I was fiercely loyal to her husband and to her, and that was important to her. And she cared about the truth, and she wanted me to always tell her the truth, even when that was a difficult conversation to have or something I didn't really want to tell her. I would call her and say, Mrs. Reagan, I need to tell you something, and then lay it out. And I learned early on, don't try to fix it, solve it, sugarcoat it, just tell her because she wants the truth.
Yeah.
And so I did very well with her because she knew I was loyal and would always tell her the truth. And one of my favorite little things that you're alluding to is when I would call her sometimes, and she did like kind of the inside scoop sometimes. And so before there was the internet or before we would, get all the good stories online, I would hear things through my little grapevine or my network of people. And so sometimes I would call her and say, Mrs. Reagan, do you have a minute? And she'd say, yes. And I'd say, all right, I'm going to tell you something, but you can't tell anybody where you heard it. And she'd always say, Peggy, I am a well for information, not a fountain. And I loved that. And I thought it was such a perfect way. But then I also sort of adopted that as my own motto, I guess, in my role, that I became a well for information, not a fountain. And sometimes the temptation, especially when you work for the big boss, if you are the source of all knowledge, there's great temptation to be a fountain
Yeah.
and to tell all and to dish a little dirt and to
Yeah.
spread a little gossip. But in the long term, that never serves you well. And to breach confidence is never worth it, even if it's done in jest, even if it's done just seemingly in an innocent way, and even sometimes if it's done amongst coworkers in the office.